All right, everyone, here we are. Lesson 8, looking at preschool language development. Those like 3.5, 4, 5-year-olds, we're going to take a look at specifically what's happening with them today. So be ready and collaborate to discuss what age is Kelly and why do you think Kelly is that particular age. So have a read through this on your own, and from your reading and from the lecture today, be ready to tell me how old do you think Kelly is and why. Okay, so just a quick review. I get to use my pencil, yay! We looked at birth to 2. We went into the pre-operational stage the other day. Now what we're going to do is look at those 4 or 5-year-olds in here in the pre-operational stage of Piaget's stages of cognitive development. So again, remembering that these guys are still here. They're representing things with words and images, but they're lacking that logical reasoning in there. So let's jump into it. So we're going to start with kids that are 36 to 40 months, so that 3 years of age, 3.5 years of age in there. So basically what they're doing at this stage, sorry, I'm just going to move my second screen here, is they're starting to use modifiers and articles. So they're starting to be able to use things like as, in, on, under, over, to actually describe what they're wanting to do. So you can actually ask them, would you play with this? Put your shoes under the bed. And they can actually start to say, can you pick me up? So pretty amazing that they can start to use these really they're quite abstract words like under, this. So it's pretty amazing that they can start to use modifiers and articles at this stage of the game. They also can change verbs. They can add ing, they can add ed, they can add like fallen leaves. They start to be able to understand that that verbs can be changed for different purposes. They also start to learn that pauses in conversations are normal, and that they need to allow for a pause, and but they still switch topics in conversations rapidly. You know, if you talk to a 3-year-old, one moment you're talking about their dog, the next minute you're talking about what you're having for supper, kind of thing, or they're just gone. So there's those pauses in conversation. They're starting to realize the importance of them, but their conversations are still sort of all over the place. They also start to use what's called a grammatical ellipsis. And this is where if you delete information, this is what a grammatical ellipsis is if you delete information, you assume that the listener already possesses the information. So say there's a conversation between a child and their mother, and they were just coming out of a restaurant, and the child said, I left my toy in there. There's an assumption that the mother will know where in there is because they just came from the restaurant. So that's a grammatical ellipsis. They start to assume some of the content in the conversation, that the other person has that particular content. And print referencing is they start to become interested in books because they start to realize that whatever that squiggly stuff on the page is important. And they start to go, that's important. I think that's going to be important in my life. And so they start to actually become very interested in print in there. Okay, so let's chug away. What I want you to do is I want you to stop me and watch this little video between Judah and Mari. They're both 3-year-olds, and I want you to jot down any language development concepts that you see in this conversation and be ready to discuss this and collaborate. They're talking on the phone. They're only 3 years old, and they're talking on the phone, so they're not getting the visual cues, or they're not seeing, facial expressions. But listen to their conversation and start to pick out some of these things that I just introduced to you here. Start to pick out actual examples in this conversation between Judy and Mari. Okay, so have a listen to that and then come on back. Aren't they cute? They're just super cute, those two little ones. Okay, so let's continue on into 3.5 to 4-year-olds. So now we're looking at this little age. Basically, they've mastered basics in speech and language in their first language. Okay, they've learned what could be really considered conversational kind of language in here. They've mastered common irregular verbs such as sat, went, broke. They can put contractions, so they can say isn't. Think about that. That's a really bizarre concept that, first of all, they even can figure out what is not is, and then they can start to, at 3.5 to 4-year-olds, 4 years of age, they can start to understand contractions. They're more consistent in their use of it's, our, theirs, him, her, those kind of things in there. And their verb phrases become more adult-like. So they'll start to say, I would like to go to the store. So their sentences are more adult-like in there. They also can use personal pronouns more regularly. That's the it's, ours, him, their, theirs, that kind of thing. They also can have what's called additive emerges. And this is when they can combine two clauses that are independent of one another. So they can say, I went to Billy's house and I am a big girl. So they're starting to be able to combine two thoughts with an and or a but or things like that. Interruptions still, however, are pretty abrupt at this age. The conversations are much more conversational, like they have that sort of give and take, but they still cannot participate in a conversation where there are 3 people. So if you ever have dealt with a 3 or 4-year-old and you and another adult are talking and the child comes up and they want your attention right away, it's actually part of their language development to really not understand that they can't interrupt them, because again, their development, it's like, I want an answer right now. And so when a child does that, we have to figure out whether we're going to say, no, honey, that's rude. We're talking right now. But it's actually part of their language development that they just can't really do conversations with 3 people. They can do a conversation with 2, but not a conversation with 3. Okay, they use negative in past tense forms, which again is kind of weird. Why don't you get me some candy? Wow, there's really wild language things going on there, but you will hear a child, a 4 years of age, say, why don't you get me some candy? Negative in the past tense form. They can also make direct and indirect requests, but they also understand that if they say, get me candy, to an adult, they might not have the desired result that if the child says, could I please have some candy, which is an indirect request. So they're starting to figure out when they can use direct requests and get the results they want, and they can start to figure out when they're using indirect requests and get the results that they want. They also can start to figure out a little bit of figurative language, and which is pretty bizarre that they can start to be thinking about language in an more abstract manner. Okay, so let's go on to here. So what I want you to do is, now I want you to go to this video, so stop me and go and watch this video from 8 minutes and 10 seconds to about 9:20. It gives you a little bit of a lecture, and then it gives you an example of a 4-year-old. This little 4-year-old is singing a pop song, and lots of her words you might not be able to understand, but look at how many words she's stringing together and how long she has all these words that she's using at 4 years of age, and she's just going on and on and on and on and on. Again, think about that little newborn baby, the one that was lying on the bed just cooing. 4 years later, this is what a 4-year-old child can do around language. So go enjoy. Oops. Okay, so now we're going to look at 4 and 5-year-olds in their language development. So now we're getting into that preschool stage. So if you are teaching kindergarten or preschool, this is going to be sorry, your language development area. So basically, they have switched from contextualized language, where they have to actually see the context, they have to actually see the table or the pen to actually be able to figure out the language. They've switched to decontextualized language, where it relies on the language itself. Okay. They're also being able to understand sentient complements, which is when a sentence represents a person's mental state, but may not necessarily be true. So let me give you an example. Murray thought, so you might hear a 4 or 5-year-old say this, Murray thought that his brother ate the last donut. So they're starting to be able to represent somebody's mental state. Murray thought is a mental state, that his brother ate the last donut. It might not necessarily be true, but they're starting to be able to think a little bit more abstractly in there. Okay, so that's a 4 to 5-year-old language development. They also start into emergent literacy. So this is when they begin to comprehend and use written language. So it's not like they can write at this point, but they're starting to go, this written stuff, actually, there's something to it. So this is metalinguistic ability. This is the ability to view language as an actual object of attention. We're going to look a little bit more at that, but they know that it's important. They also have pretty much a sense of the alphabet. They start at about age 3, and by age 4 or 5, they basically, most kids who have had some exposure to books and literacy actually have an understanding of the alphabet and what's going on in the alphabet. They also, again, have that print awareness. They understand print is important, and they're starting to sense that words are made up of different sounds. So that's the phonological awareness. They're starting to figure out, yep, these words actually make up some sounds in there. And oral language, absolutely, a 5-year-old is still very, very dependent on oral language. Okay, let's go through and just what does 4 and 5-year-old language actually look like? They should know all their phonemes, so their smallest unit of sound of their native language. So they know sh, z, f, a, those kind of things. They actually totally understand the verb to be. They can use it in any context. Their sentence structure expands, so it moves from just subject, verb, object to subject, verb, object, adverb. They start to add in adjectives, so they're starting to sound more adult at this particular stage. They also gain words through fast mapping and overextension. So fast mapping is when they connect a new word to a known context or something that they can reference. Okay, so there's some kind of, they know the word, they have a sense of what's going on, and they can link these new words to that. Overextension is when they continue this from earlier on, is when they extend where they call anything round a ball, but it becomes more based on function. So they may call any tools instead of saying that's a hammer, that's a screwdriver, that's an anvil, because they know it's a tool, but now they're not basing it on shape anymore. They're basing it on its actual function. Okay, so this is an interesting, I think you should, this is kind of a fun one to watch. It's called the WUG test, and they start to understand the concept of grammatical rules. So the researchers, this is a pretty old test, but again, it's interesting to, they start to go, oh, they understand the rules of grammar, even if the word is nonsense. So this boy is about 5.5 in the video, but it's this concept of grammatical rules starts at between 4 and 5. Okay, and finally, they desire shared reading. They will pick up books. They want you to read to them. They're gaining language skills from you reading them. They're gaining the idea that written language is important. And so it's crucial at this point to be reading to kids. It's not just fun. It's absolutely crucial. Okay, and then I want you to, well, here we go. So watch this video on the WUG test, and now I want you to just have a little bit of a look at this preschool language example here. This is a little girl who's going, she's super cute. She's going through flashcards, and she's starting to be able to recognize letters and know some of the animals that correspond. I want you to particularly watch when she gets to N, because it's super interesting to watch what happens. Amazing though that at this stage that they can figure out the phonemes. They can figure out that that the different words start with the different letters, like g, gorilla, j, giraffe, that kind of thing in there. Okay, I'm going to stop my video here, and then I'm going to do the next video will be on expressive and receptive language in there. So enjoy this little romp through preschool language development.